Hi, so I'm Kirsty Taylor,
And I'm Emma Davies.
and we're just going to have a little chat about new beginnings and collaborations.
So Kirsty, why do you make art?
Okay, well, I was a performing arts manager for 30 years-ish and worked with creative makers and artists, and I've really enjoyed occupying that space and being surrounded by creativity. But my own stimulus and outlet for creativity has normally been through the mediums of dance and music, spoken word and theatre. However, during the pandemic last year, as a response to moving to Australia and being geographically isolated, and also as a response to personal loss and grief that happened to me in 2019, I started taking photographs to help me reflect on my own personal life journey and the world around me. So on my friend's birthday in August 2020, I woke up and saw a rainbow on the floor, and then I saw a rainbow on the wall, and then I saw a rainbow in the bathroom. And so I just started taking photos and thinking about the connection between rainbows, light, distance, and connectivity, and trying to make the sense of the world through the COVID prism. So this is the first time that I've exhibited at an art exhibition, apart from the Art of Isolation in 2020. And yeah, those pieces came out of everything that I've just talked about. So my first piece was Hope Swims Upstream, and the two pieces that are being exhibited just now are part of that trilogy, and they're called Oscillate and Levitation Navigates. So I'm an emerging artist, and it's a brand new journey for me. So how about you, Emma? Why art for you?
Well, there's some of what you were saying resonates with me, but how exciting to move from one creative outlet through to another. That's just brilliant. And there's something, isn't there, about lockdown that has shifted. I think you talked about this being a new journey, and I think for me there's some element of that too. Something about having more time to reflect and think about different ways of doing things. So for me, I started making art or started painting about 15 years ago as a response to being in a lot of pain. And I had a back operation and I was struggling, and I couldn't lie down or sit down for a while, but I could stand, and that was where I was most comfortable. So I started making art and playing with paint at that time, because it helped me with pain, quite literally, because of the focus. And so sort of got me out of the pain and more into what I was putting on the canvas. And then over time, as my pain subsided, I'm pleased to say, and I'm fine, I found that process to be a really grounding one for me. So I'm an academic, and I do lots of policy stuff in quite heavy areas like domestic violence and sexual assault and that kind of stuff. And for me, this is a balance to my other work. So this is the part of me that enables me, A, to use a different part of my brain, and B, it's the balance stuff in terms of process and ground. So there's a zone I get into when I'm lucky and I'm painting. It doesn't always happen, but when it does, time feels different, and that way of being in the world for me is different, and 8 hours flies by when I'm completely absorbed, and it's such a privilege and an honor really to be able to get there, and that's really what it's about for me. So more than anything else, for me it's about peace, and about ground, and a balance to some of the pain I absorb through supporting others and through looking at some quite difficult stuff in terms of the literature, etc. So yeah, so that's really what it's about for me, rather than about the output, if that makes any sense. That said, over time, particularly over the last 2 or 3 years, I've exhibited a few times. I've sold some paintings, which is a buzz, not partly the money, but partly the fact that people have responded. Some people have responded well to some of my paintings, and that's such a buzz. And so there's something now for me about the output too. Sometimes I really love my paintings afterwards. Sometimes I really don't. More often, I like a little bit of them, not all of them. And these 2 paintings, I like that that are in this exhibition, and one of them's called Stories, and it's trees, and I'll talk more about the inspiration of that later, and Drifting, both of which I was able to get into that zone, and I've enjoyed creating. I'll come back to inspiration, I think, later. So what do you most like about this part of your creative journey, being an emerging artist?
Oh, thanks, Emma. It's lovely to hear about your life and journey and connections, etc. It's inspiring. Yeah, so, well, it's a new journey for me in terms of this art form. In terms of creativity, I mean, creativity in sense of different art forms have been part of my life really since I was 5. And eventually, you know, I went to university, I was dancing, I was, you know, in the theatre, I was writing stuff, playing music, blah, blah, blah. But I felt really in terms of the workplace, I just couldn't live without having creativity and being surrounded by creative people. And more and more I've been thinking about that and why, you know, because last year with all the challenges, there's been a lot of funding challenges. I hate to use the F word, but funding is a big factor in terms of projects and things. And that's been a lot of my working life, trying to get money together and organising festivals and organising, you know, touring schemes and things like that. But in terms of myself, over the last sort of 10 years or so, I really realised I started missing being creative in terms of myself, if you understand that. So,
yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was kind of an enabler and a facilitator for other creative makers, and you know, and visual art wasn't something I ever identified myself with. And my daughter, one of them, she's an artist, and you know, actually how I got involved in it was last year. I was trying to encourage her to apply for an exhibition, and she didn't. And then I just thought, well, do you know what? I'm going to apply for it. So that's how it started, yeah. And I don't dance anymore. I do a bit of singing and things like that. So it was interesting, just starting to take the photos. And I have been dabbling a little bit with painting and things, but I'm not ready to share that with the world yet, Emma. I'm not ready. So it's just been a new way of thinking and being, and actually it helps me relax. Being creative helps me relax and feel things differently and see the world differently, which I think is really important. And you know, I've worked more and more in the last sort of 15 years more with community arts projects. So at a societal level, I see that artistic endeavours and immersing yourself in that is important. But on an individual level for myself, I feel it's quite a powerful way for me to feel things differently, and I feel different. So I don't know how to majorly articulate it, because as I said before, it is a new beginning for me, which is great in terms of the title of the exhibition, and it was my maiden voyage into visual art exhibitioning. I'm not quite sure of all the terminology yet, so pardon my lack of knowledge in terms of the terminology in terms of the visual art world. But it's been quite powerful in terms of connecting in a different creative genre for me, And you mentioned about the output as well. At the moment for me, it's just more really something for myself. And so, that's just started for me last year. And, the fact that now we're part of this collective as well, which we'll talk about in a bit, that's also part of that journey, which I think is quite special as well, to connect with other people who, potentially have been, creating for a long time, whereas I'm just new, and it's uncharted journey for me. It's kind of exciting. Really. So I feel quite excited about it at the moment, and I just don't know, I don't know how it's going to take me, or where I'm in terms of my own journey and my own techniques, but it's exciting just thinking, well, I can just explore things in a different medium, in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how about you, Emma? What do you like?
Well, one thing that strikes me in what you were saying, that resonates so clearly with me, is this seeing, being, and feeling differently. And I've stolen your line, or paraphrased it, but not a lot. It is that absolutely resonates for me. That I think one of the joys of it is that I have learnt to see more when I was and be more in a different space. When I was a child, I didn't have that creative process outlet that you've described, which is such a joy, really. I was an academic child, and my mum was very keen on me succeeding as an academic, or not as an academic, but succeeding as I was first generation educated, and for mum, education was everything. And so because I was able to do it, I was pushed that way, and anything else that I wanted to do wasn't seen as important or as valuable. And while mum, she passed away in May, and while she was did her very best as a parent and did what she thought was best as a child of immigrants, she that was probably a wee bit misguided, and I think something that later on in life she saw differently, and so I hadn't really done any of that stuff, or at least it been seen as valuable. I remember my needlework teacher got very cross with me because I'm not very exact, so that I was never encouraged for any of that stuff in terms of any creative outlet. And so as I got older, I think that part of me was not fulfilled, really. And so now I think I'm waffling all over the place, but anyway, so now I kind of feel that I've got, as an adult, I can make my own choices about what's valuable and what isn't. And indeed, in the last part of my mum's life, last few years, she could not have been more encouraging of my art, which is a lovely irony. And as things changed, she had more dementia. Our relationship changed, and she got so excited every time I did anything, whereas as a child, it was all seen as irrelevant. So it's as life moves on and life changes, so our priorities change, and so we see things differently. And for me, that balance is really what matters. And also as I say, your line really resonates with me, this whole seeing differently. I think for me, art is partly about seeing differently and being different. It's a different domain of action, and the more I do it, the more engaged and rewarding I find it. So what are your biggest inspirations, and what's that about? Why is that?
Yeah, well, Emma, it's heartwarming to hear about your mum's support of your creative endeavours at the sort of end stage of her life. Thank you for sharing that. So biggest inspirations in terms of artists or inspirations generally. There's loads of inspirations politically, etc. But if we're talking about creativity, I was just listening to what you were saying actually in terms of value and the reasons why parents sort of influence the children in certain ways, and the opportunities that they help or put importance on as you're growing up, because we are very influenced by our caregivers at a young age. And so I would like to talk a little bit about my father, because my dad died at the end. Actually, I'm trying to think. Not last year, the year before. And he was a huge, huge personality, physically very big and a huge personality. Now, he was brought up in, well, he'd always describe in poverty, and that's true. And, you know, in his household, you know, his father was a manual labourer and his mother was a dinner lady, and there was a kind of blended family situation, and my grandparents slept in the living room, etc. And there wasn't a lot of money, and there certainly wasn't inspiration for him to go on a creative journey. However, my dad said to them, when they said to him at 14, well, you're going to go and do a butcher's apprenticeship, he said, I'm going to become an architect. Now, I'm not quite sure where that came from. I never found out where he got the inspiration to become an architect, but he did, and he got rejected.
How cool is that?
Yeah, it is cool. And his brother, who was actually his cousin, but his brother that my grandparents brought up, he became a scientist. He was older than my dad. But anyway, maybe that was the inspiration, that education was the way out of poverty for him.
Yeah, certainly for my mum it was.
Yeah, so he went off and didn't get in a first time round to Edinburgh College of Art, and then got in a second time round. And he always said, oh, I was the only person there from working, you know, from like a state education, blah, blah, blah. And there were interesting people there, like John Bellany and et cetera, et cetera. So he went off to art college before I was born, and he did sculpting at first, and then he did architecture. So I was born just literally 3 days after he got his first job as an architect. And, you know, so basically when, you know, throughout my life, I was supported in terms of creativity and its importance in the world. Architecture is a creative yet technical endeavour, and my dad also was a visual artist, and he lost his sight for the last 10 years of his life. He had a stroke, and my dad still painted and was part of exhibiting. So, you know, in terms of me performing when I was young and things like that, you know, it was never kind of, oh, leave school and go. And I was pretty academic at school as well. It wasn't sort of, oh, go off and be a lawyer or whatever, or anything that's secure. It was like, basically go and follow your dreams, do what you want to do. So yeah, my father was very, very inspiring, and he was such an enthusiastic person. You know, you kind of believe in anything that he was saying. So yeah, so he kind of opened a doorway for me, a bit like an Alice in Wonderland situation. You either went down it or you went up it, you know. But it was very interesting. I was surrounded by the projects that he put a value on, and you know, he worked ultimately in inner city spaces and valued public art, etc., etc. But I was never seen as the visual art person, because I wasn't. I was more into playing my music and dancing, etc. But yeah, so I'd say my dad, in terms of inspiration for creativity and the, you know, the way I've you know, lived my life, has been my father, really. And he could definitely convey emotion, I'd say, and rawness through a variety of different mediums in terms of what he produced as well. And often it was palatable yet confronting in different ways. So yeah. I'm going to say my dad. There's so many other people in terms of art, but I have to honour my dad in this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds courageous. That I think I said my mum also had. It's that whole education is a way out, and certainly that was the case for my family and how they saw it, particularly my mum. For me, the biggest inspirations shift and change. So I get inspired by different artists and different dimensions of their art. I really like Mark Bradford's work. I think it's truly extraordinary the way that he's able to bridge beauty with I think you used the word rawness that resonates for me. That's truly extraordinary. But a whole heap of different artists at different times. Sometimes there are particular types of periods of people's work that I find inspiring rather than others, or different types of it. So for Picasso stuff, I like the blue period that's very dark, whereas some of his other work leaves me cold. So there's different, and I go through different phases and different ways of looking at it. I've never studied art, and although I mean at home I have and sort of read and watched and kind of looked at various things. I have a mentor, and he inspires me to think differently and explore texture, which is probably the dimension of art that I enjoy most, or that comes easiest to me, in that zone I talked about, where I can play with different ways of applying paint, and that and manipulating paint, and I enjoy that. I enjoy getting really mucky. I enjoy kind of getting into it, and I really like the feel of oil paint. In particular, the way it. I just like the texture of it, and I'm moving my hands about a lot at the minute, but that won't work on an audio. But I like the way that it feels, and kind of getting in it and mucky, and I always get it everywhere, and that's a bit that sort of moved me off of the inspiring thing. So so it varies. I think one of the things for me in terms of is that I enjoy art that is kind of offers some sense of peace, or some sense of a way of shifts mood, and the way that one feels and gets in kind of contact with that. And some people yeah, so I there's lots of different artists that that come to mind around that gives me a sense of a different space. And at the minute, I'm just happen to be thinking about the Rothko room in the Tate, where I could spend ages. But there's one of the things I want to do more of is to connect some of the kind of emotion and harsher stuff in the world, because politics is actually an important part of me. And connect more of that. So at the minute it's a bit disconnected. So my art often has a sense of for me anyway, a sense of peace and ground in it. And one of the pieces I've got in here is a bit darker, the stories piece. And I have painted some more that has a darker energy as well. But I'd like to be able to create more political art with beauty, and that's why I raised at the beginning of this bit Mark Bradford's work, because his work is exquisitely beautiful and highly political. And I'm not a fan of slogans on art and words on art. I like to write, but I do keep those separate, and that feels good for me. But I'd like to be able to get more political passion in some of my work. And so I suppose that's where I would like to move over time. But I'm going to move back to you if I can. So, so where do you see on the journey you're on? And I appreciate it can be difficult to think in 5-year timeframes. But so in the space, the emerging space you're in, where do you see yourself in a few years' time? Where do you think the journey might be taking you?
Yeah, well, in about 5 minutes after our chat, I'm going to check out Mark Bradford and the political passion that he's got that you'd like to embrace. So that sounds interesting. So 5 years in terms of this visual art space that I'm learning about and just dipping my toes in the water just now, I would say. I've got a lot of learning and developing to do, loads, and that's exciting, new and fresh, and it's a different stage of my life, so it's quite exciting to be entering into a different zone and learning new skills and stuff like that. It sounds a bit technical and boring, but actually it's something that I need to do, and spending a bit more time doing that and being more comfortable exploring different mediums of painting. So in terms of 5 years, I've got a lot of a journey between now and then. Looking at painting, mixed media, improving techniques, I love collaborations, and I've spent a lot of my career in the arts organising things and trying to join up the dots and bringing people together, who, whether it's dance and spoken word, or merging that with a filmmaker, making a film with that. So lots of different art forms and ideas and thinkers and makers coming together. So I see myself maybe in 5 years, blue sky thinking, being part of projects that collaborate, but also at the same time working on all the individual stuff that I need to do to develop technically, or explore which mediums I feel comfortable in, and get into that kind of rhythm that feels good for me. At the moment, it's just like trying anything new. It's going to hurt a little bit because it's just kind of dipping your toe in the water. If you learn tap dancing for the first time, it takes a while. So this is thing I feel is like oiling my wheels a little bit. But yeah, I just think it's really exciting, and also another quick add-on is I'm really into environmental, talking about politics, environmental issues, and I've been a vegetarian for over 25 years. I studied geography and anthropology at university in the 80s, believe it or not, but set up a theatre company when I was a student in London. And so in terms of geography, I learned all about acid rain and all that kind of stuff. We were talking about all of that in the 80s. So in terms of being a visual artist, I suppose blue sky thinking 5 years, I'd possibly love to be looking at, I don't know, installations that reflect the environment and all the changes that are going on. But there's loads of other agendas in the world that I'm passionate about, but that's one that I made a conscious choice in terms of becoming a vegetarian over 25 years ago. I think it was 26 years ago. So it was kind of an ethical thing for me, and a bit political, but I wouldn't necessarily be incorporating that in the art. Maybe I would, but in terms of the environment, I think that connects. So so I'm waffling on, but who knows? Let's just wait and see. Watch this space for all of us and see what happens. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. Sorry.
So how about you? How about you? Have you got any thoughts or?
I think for me, I'd like to get more skilled. I think that's hugely important in terms of those practical kind of skills. So I enjoy painting in particular, and I like collagraphs. I had to go with collage and printing from collage, and again for me that's about texture, and I get buzz out of that. What I need to do, a bit like sort of eating your vegetables before your pudding stuff, is more drawing. I need to get better at drawing, so 5 years time I'm going to be better at it, but I'm thinking very seriously as I'm in my 50s, and I'm thinking about how I think art will become an increasing part of my life over the next probably 10 years, and I am keen on creating using this space more and more, and drawing more of the politics of, and for me the sort of broad frame of politics is around peace, really, and that connects with my other part of my work too, around which involves a lot of abuse of power and conflict, and I see those dynamics at all sorts of different levels, be they individual, be they family, and they come from, you mentioned, I think, when you're talking about your dad, the huge importance of the early years of life, and of course there's lots of science to back that up. So there's something about for me how I use that creative journey over the next 5 years or so, bring in more political processes into that in relation to peace. But what exactly that looks like, I don't know. I've played with the idea of going to art school because I've had no formal education in art, and I was talking to my mentor about that, which type of school and which type of way, I'm not sure. but I think within the not too distant future, I'll probably do that part-time within the next year or so, and build that journey up, or build up not only the skills but that connection I've talked about before in terms of that creative outlet. So I think, yeah, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but what I do know is that the journey in itself is so rewarding and exciting, and it's where I get the biggest lift and buzz. Actually, I just love it. So I don't know what it'll look like exactly, but I know that it'll have some good parts of it. So our last question, I think, is sort of relates to the collective. So I'm wondering what it's. We're in the early stages of this, but I wonder what that looks like for you, given all your work on collaborations.
Yeah, well, I was interested hearing about the fact you've got a mentor in terms of your, as an artist, and you're getting support that way. So I was thinking, actually, I'd love to have some kind of mentor for me at some point. So I'll see if maybe that might come out of this collective. I don't know. But yeah, it's just the early stages of being part of this collective. It's a really exciting idea, and absolutely delighted to be part of it. I see it as a supportive platform, where people can bounce ideas off each other, a kind of better together approach, and a place where people signpost ideas and opportunities, and just be a general camaraderie, and through that, who knows what might happen. I think there hopefully will be other exhibitions, and I'm just interested to learn from other people's experiences. Really, I'm the new kid on the block, although like you, Emma, I'm in my 50s as well, and age is just a number, but actually we gather all this experience in life, and I just feel very excited in these dark times in the world to be discovering something that's a bit of light in my life, different form of light in my life, and something new, and that's the way to learn about yourself and keep moving forward and make sense of things, even though there's a lot of rubbish going on in the world just now. So being part of a collective, yeah, it's a positive community. It's a sense of community. I think the word's community, and I know, having worked in different art form sectors over the years, I'm not saying there isn't a sense of support and community, but often people are competing for different bits of funding, blah blah blah, stuff like that. But I just see it as a supportive, wonderful thing to be a part of. The only thing is, at the moment that I'm based in Australia, and of course the Zoom calls are like normally about 3 o'clock in the morning, and although I don't need much sleep, I'm normally asleep between about 2 and 6, so I'm not awake to hear other people's voices. But it's lovely to hear your voice, Emma, and I can kind of keep in touch at the moment online. But I'll kind of finish in terms of my response to that question on my thoughts around the first piece that I put in, not for the New Beginnings exhibition, but the last exhibition in October that you were part of as well, Emma, the Art of Isolation exhibition. And I was thinking about, the symbol of rainbows, that in Britain the NHS had the symbol of hope and rainbows and all of that. And I was looking at these rainbows that were coming through as the light refracting, and thinking that that's kind of something that connects us all. This light, it's invisible and intangible, but it's a bridge of colourful connectivity. So I'd like to think of the collective as a bridge of colourful connectivity, Emma. So
Tackles that.
How about you? How do you feel?
Well, I think I'd end on that. So what a beautiful way of seeing it. I feel like the new kid on the block too. I'm not I've never joined an art collective before, although like you, I facilitate a lot of collaboration between people in my working life and get all sorts of projects off the ground. I really appreciate the way that in the small time we've been together as a collective, the way that Adam facilitates engagement. I have, as somebody that plays that role in other projects and other things, not the art world, I have tremendous respect for his skill and way of doing that. So it's partly, but broadly for me, it's about, it's kind of similar to you, really. How do we, it's a supportive environment. It's a way of, a way of connecting. And I'm not quite sure where that goes, and that sense of community. I often feel, because I'm often very short of time, particularly at the minute, and through the pandemic, it's been, my other working life has infringed into my space in a way that my work doesn't usually. And so I have less time, so I sometimes worry what I've got to offer at the minute to that collective endeavour. So, but some of that, in other worlds, I'm a coach. I coach people at times and kind of mentoring, and while I don't feel I have that to offer in terms of skills of art, there's a generic thing there in terms of goals that maybe I can contribute, and then that kind of shared peer mentoring stuff maybe would be a really important part of this, for me, could be helpful in terms of being part of the collective. I'd like to be able to offer more over time, and I also like the idea of collaboration, which in art I've in my art practice I've never done, but in all the other dimensions of my life I do a lot of. So how I bring that as parts of me together. So I think for me part of this is about how I bring different dimensions of me and integrate that together, and the collective might to some extent offer me a little bit of an opportunity to do that, because by definition it's a collective endeavor, and so how that pans out and what happens with that over time, I really don't know. But there's some lovely stuff that is starting to emerge slowly through just through the sort of website stuff that's been set up, and I hoping that more of that will lead to more connectivity, more collaboration, and more of the kind of, you know, being the light we want to be. So yeah, I think I'd like to leave it there. But I'd like you to repeat your last line if you remember it.
Oh, yeah.
From what you were saying.
Well, I'll just say bridge of colourful connectivity. That's what the collective, was that the last line? I think it was. I was just what we articulately had to say. I think it's lovely. You've got a lovely way of saying things, and I'd also like to echo your sentiments around Adam as well, because he's the reason that we're chatting and these exhibitions have taken place, but he has brought everyone together, and he's like a dynamo and a superstar organizer and getting everyone engaging. So let's just see where it all goes, and bridge of colourful connectivity. And it's been lovely connecting with you tonight, my time, and the morning, your time as well.